Morality without God, relativism. What kind of moral person would different moral viewpoints produce? Mother Teresa is an example of a good moral system or viewpoint and Hitler of a bad moral viewpoint. Everybody strives to be moral, hopefully. When accused of an immoral action, one would almost always offer reasons to defend the action and seldom denies the immoral principle underlying this action. What you have said is a lie, and you would defend the reason for the lie or deny that it was a lie, though never the principle that the lie was immoral. We all have a deep sense of what is right and what is wrong, of what is moral. But what are the implications and consequences if there is no objective moral standard, no transcendent standard outside of us, if there is no God? The text of this talk is on my blog, the link to my blog on the description below this video. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Talk, and my sixth talk in the series, Time to Think. I'm Tertius, a plastic and reconstructive surgeon with a zeal for God and a zeal for truth, and why it is rational to believe. So what are the kinds of people one would expect moral relativism would produce? Both relativism and subjectivism claim that there is no universal truth or objective truth. In relativism, morality or truth exists in relation to culture, traditions, and society, while in subjectivism, morality or truth is subject and personal. According to these views, things are true only in respect of the individual or set of individuals who holds them. Truth is relative to the subject. When we accept that what is right for me is not necessarily right for you, it would mean that people don't really care about others and other people's moral viewpoint, as what is right for me is what is important. It would produce people whose society marches to the beat of each individual's own drum, making one's own moral rules. A sociopath is a person with no conscience. He freely changes his moral values all the time. This is the fully expressed relativist. If it is all relative, and if the decision that something is morally right or wrong depends on variables, on people, on ideas, on societies, all that change over time, we might find ourselves in a very difficult situation. A situation that no principles can be laid down or taught. We will find that we are in changing situations all the time, and that morality becomes such a dynamically changing entity that it will crumble into nothing but individual taste. And then what would we find? A Hitler, a Mao Zedong, a Stalin, or cannibalism? There are three types of moral relativism that attempts to justify relativism. In the first instance, society does relativism. That is cultural relativism or descriptive relativism. The claim is, we used to think that morality was subjective, but that was before we encountered other cultures and their moral practices. Now we see that people do in fact differ morally across cultures. So morality is just a function of culture. What is the response to this? Even if this observation is true, then it still does not follow that no one is objectively correct. It is not so clear that there is such a wide diversity of morals. Instead, it could be a difference over the facts rather than over the values. For example, abortion. Pro-life and pro-choice both hold to value that we should not take the lives of innocent humans, but they differ over who counts as a person. Some of the apparent differences in cultures are the differences in the facts as they see it. Observation only is not a sound conclusion for relativism. It tells us about the culture and not about morality. In the second instance, society says relativism. The claim is, you should do what your society says. You ought to do what your society says you should do, right and wrong are society directed, and cultural ideas are equally valid. The response to this is, but then there can't be an immoral society. Each society has its own values, and you cannot critique another society from the outside. By what standard can you critique it? And one cannot critique one's own society, and by definition, there cannot be immoral laws. Against what standard would you measure these immoral laws? The example of this is the Nuremberg trial and how the Nazis appealed to this idea that there are no overarching moral truths by which we can judge another culture. They were just following orders, what their society structure demanded from them. But the International Tribunal did not accept it. The Nazis were immoral. But on the society says relativism view, we could not have judged the Nazis. Yet what they did was clearly immoral. Corrie ten Boom would have been immoral too for going against the laws of her society at the time. In other words, the rules of the Nazis at the time. Yet that conclusion is widely counterintuitive. Society says relativism reduces morality to what the law says and not to what is moral. Furthermore, you cannot critique your own society. If this type of relativism were true, then it would be immoral to go against your own society, and there cannot be any moral reformers who, by definition, would be immoral for going against their society. Yet this too seems clearly a mistake. There are, by definition, no immoral laws. It reduces what is moral to what is legal under this system. Thirdly, I say relativism. This is individual ethical relativism. What is right for one person might not be right for another. This is the most radical form of relativism, also known as subjectivism. But moral truths are known directly and immediately. You don't come to a conclusion, you know it. Examples: murder is wrong, torturing babies is wrong, etc. These are clear-cut examples of moral truths, and the burden of proof should be on the relativist who denies them. There are 7 fatal flaws in relativism. 1. If morality is relative, then relativists can never say something is right or wrong in itself. They cannot claim something is intrinsically or objectively wrong for all people. 2. Relatives cannot complain about the problem of evil. To be consistent, evil must be relative to the individual. 3. Relatives cannot place blame or accept praise. We praise people like Mother Teresa for doing truly good things, not simply if she did what we happen to like, but on the relative's view, there is no objective goodness or badness. Praising or blaming another is to make a moral judgment, but on this view, there is nothing for which to praise or blame another. 4. Relatives cannot claim anything as unfair or unjust. These concepts are normative too and presuppose a universal standard, but they make no sense if morality is relative to the individual. 5. Relatives cannot improve their own morality. Example of bowling. You can only improve your bowling when you have a standard against which you can measure your performance. But here there is no such standard if relativism is true. Individuals can change their morality, but that does not solve the problem. 6. Relativism cannot have meaningful moral discussions if you cannot improve your morality. If there is no such thing as common good, then such discussions are really meaningless. 7. Relatives cannot promote the obligation to be tolerant. Tolerance makes sense only if it is an objective moral truth. If there are no interpersonal moral obligations, then there is no basis to promote the virtue of tolerance. Thus, the consequence of practicing moral relativism is a world in which nothing is right or wrong, evil or good for all people. Nothing is worthy of praise or blame. There is no accountability, no meaningful moral discourse or improvement. A world with no moral tolerance. Nobody can live this way, and nobody really do. But relativism is the most pervasive viewpoint. People can talk this way, but they cannot live it. One sees what people's real moral intuitions are when their guard is not up. For example, the relatives cannot complain of injustice, but they do. That's not fair. That's my seat. I was here first. If people were to speak up against injustice, they deny relativism. But if they don't speak up about injustice, then they deny their humanity. But the relativist might still say, you shouldn't force your morality upon me. He is then, in fact, using morality to say this, his own moral standpoint. Everybody should decide their own right or wrong, so I decide that you are wrong. The reply to this, why not? They will in turn push their morality upon you. The relativists cannot accept this practice because they are human beings. Again, if you speak up against injustice, you deny relativism, and if you don't speak it out, you deny your humanity. If one would take his cell phone and walk away, he would immediately object, which forces the relativist to see that he or she really holds to an objective standard. We do not want people to be relativist towards us. We want them to be virtuous, show high moral standards. People are often relativist naively and unreflectively. When they are wronged, they quickly become moral absolutists. If relativism is true, then none of the following prima facie bindings can always be true under ordinary circumstances. Like, it is wrong to kill innocent people, or to torture people for fun, or to rape, that one could do justice and treat people equally or obey just laws. Relativism commits two fallacies. 1. Conventional ethical relativism cannot account for moral reformers who stood up against culture, for example, Jesus or Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. But in reality, we think that they were doing right in their actions. Secondly, relativism cannot account for moral progress. We tend to think that we have improved morally over time. For example, we no longer permit slavery. But if relativism is true, then we cannot get closer to getting better, as there is no such thing as better. Relativism fails. It makes no sense and cannot overcome reality. Objective moral values exist, but what is the moral law then? The moral law is not something that is testable by science. But moral law exists and implicates an objective moral lawgiver. See my talk on morality. The link is on the description below this video. Credit to Greg Kugel of Biola University, California, for many of the thoughts in this talk. If you found the arguments expressed in this talk compelling, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Share it with your friends and family and on your social media. This will be of huge help to spread the message of why it is rational to believe in God. Facts we should know about the reality of God and hopefully help to better understand the factual reasons to believe. Thank you.